Over to you then, Lee.
Right, brilliant. Thank you very much. Um, right, well, I didn't know what to tie tonight when Derek asked me, so I thought, what with the John Saxton thing sort of happening is charity fly frame. I thought I'd do some mayflies. So to
Oh, good.
start off with, that was just to show in a minute. But basically, I've got several life cycle stages of mayfly. And when I say mayfly, I mean like the big UK Danica mayfly. So we're going to start off with like a nymph emerger. We're going to do a couple of dun patterns, and then we got a spinner pattern. Um, so with most of my mayfly patterns, I use the grip hooks are great. The 11801 BLs they're amazing. They're really good long shank dry fly mayfly hooks. So they're really strong, really light, very sharp. Um, just a really good mayfly hook. So I've got size 10 and 12. So that basically sort of covers the sort of the size Danica sizes. I used to a bloke always used to say to me that the big ones are the ladies and the small ones are the male, the male mayflies. Well, they do have the females are bigger than the males, but I personally think a lot of it is more to do with the life cycle sort of stage things. The mayfly has a I'm going to unplug that light because it keeps messing about. Um, as sort of normal Danica, they normally have like a 2 year um, cycle, as a nymph underwater before they hatch, and I'm convinced that some years you'll have a year where you'll get lots of big mayflies, and they're all like the 2 year ones, and then you'll have years where you'll get a lot of smaller mayflies, and they are like just the 1 year cycle. I'm just beating up my other light here that doesn't want to work at the moment, but oh come on. Here we go. Right. Yeah, so there's that's so I sort of stick to size 10s and 12s. That sort of covers the sizes you want. If you do want to sort of tell the difference, there's our Danica. So apart from Cyril put in there that it's a lady, the easiest way to tell the difference between a male and a female mayfly is the eyes. The eyes on that one are quite small, so that's a lady. The males, the eyes are much bigger on the males. So I know it's a different species. This is a yellow maiden, but look at the eyes on that. So that's how you tell whether it's a boy or a girl. Not that it matters, a great deal, but so the males have got the big eyes to spot the females when they're out dancing, for mating. So we get on with our first fly, which is going to be like a nymph emerger. And this is another sort of observation point is normally like clink hammer hooks are great, a mayfly nymph emerger, lovely hook for doing that sort of thing. But I've noticed a couple of years ago watching like Danica's hatch like in a tray, they don't their body isn't curved at all. I think if you think of something trying to squeeze out of a shuck, it's a lot more efficient if they're straight. And if you actually look at a Danica hatching, they're literally straight. They're just angled down in the water. It must be a more efficient way to get out of the shuck. So I started tying these on straight shanks now. And again, this is one of the grip 11801 BLs in a size 12. This is so it's a lovely light hook, very sharp, nice and strong. So we get some thread on here. I'm a UTC fan, UTC 70 denier, and a good reason for using this as well on this fly is we are going to be doing a dubbing loop. So the flat unbraided thread is the way to go for that. So I've run out of tan. Normally I'd like to use tan, but this is basically like a reject dye. It's near tan, but it's not. It's a fluorescent shell pink, but or that's what it's supposed to be. But it was just a bad batch, so I'll just use that because it's somewhere. handy near to the colour. So if anyone's got any questions through any of this, just shout. But we get cracking. So I'm just going to run some thread down the shank, make a nice foundation for our fly. I changed bobbin holders earlier. I've got some of the CMCO ones I really like using, but they were really squeaky, so I thought I better not use them. You'll be going mad. So there's some thread on the hook. I've got all the patterns bagged up, so they should be nice and organised.
To get rid of the squeak, rub the arm part of your nose.
Yeah.
It greases them up.
I do like a tight bobbin holder, I must admit, but yeah, I got it needs adjusting. It does squeak something chronic. So this fly is going to be, it involves a lot of soft materials. So it's all about soft and movement in the water. So this is English partridge skin. This one is a bit beaten up and really at it now. But it's just great for the bigger feathers for tails and things. So it's still getting me use out of it. I think I got that off Toby Merrigan years ago. So I've got English partridge feather. So we're just going to use this for some nice soft buggy looking tails. So I'm just going to strip off the fluff at the bottom. Line up some tips. And I'm hoping this year we'll have a better year for the Mayfly. Where I am in Wiltshire, it was terrible. I think I hardly saw any. It was rubbish.
We had a bad year down here as well.
Yeah. So there's our tail. Couple of probably about 10 fibres there. So I just offer it up for length. And then tie that in. Check you're happy. Yeah, happy with that. So now I'm just going to tie in the butts. Here's a little trick. Obviously, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but if I just keep winding, obviously those butts are going to want to creep around the other side of the hook. If you just give the thread a little kick that way, it sort of keeps it on top of the hook, keeps it on top of the shank, stops it getting wrapped around. And if I can do it with things, I can actually keep doing it and make it go the other way around the hook. There's that tied in. So we're going to run down, back down to the tail. I'm not going to bother with the rib or anything on this fly. We're just going to have a pale hare's ear abdomen on it. So I'm going to use one of the hen's dispensers. So I think it's number 1. Is a nice sort of pale colour.
Is the Wiley renowned for its Mayfly, actually?
Yeah, normally it's really good. Yeah, it was great, but last year was just rubbish. So I'm hoping if my sort of 2-year, 1-year theory is correct, that hopefully this year would be a bumper year. But we have had problems. There's been water issues and pollution issues, and so hopefully no sort of damage has been done. But we'll see. So I've got me dubbing. I'm just going to offer that up to the thread. I'm just going to, all I worry about is getting that spike at the top. I'm not worried about the rest of the dubbing. I'm just worried about getting that spike at the top. And I can offer it up. And then once I've got my first turn, then I've got an anchor point where I can tease out the rest of the dubbing, create my rope, and then just create a nice mayfly shaped abdomen, slightly sort of cigar shape, not quite enough dub in there. Makes a change, normally put too much on, but I think I started tying this fly about 3 years ago. I think it's done it certainly works okay. So that would do. So as a rule, sort of proportionally wise, I always use my scissors. You've probably seen me do it before, like a pair of like calipers to gauge. You know, I can measure tail lengths and use my scissors, you know, to gauge proportions. On most sort of agile darters, little tiny olive mayflies, it's, you know, it's sort of set proportion, 2/3 to 1/3 or 3/5 to 2/5. On a Danica mayfly, the thoraxes are quite a bit bigger. You know, the thorax it's not the same proportions as like a little olive. So I leave enough room for, you know, the bigger thorax. So I'm happy with where it is. So now I'm going to get some CDC. We've got some good old Cook's Hill, sort of like pale dun coloured CDC. So I've already selected a few feathers. We're going for quite big feathers, not massive, but, you know, sort of, they're probably about 1.5 inches long. Nice fluffy ones. I always think the fluffier they are, the more buoyant they are, the more they're going to trap bubbles. So now I'm just offering up. There's 2. Take your time. Make sure the tips are lined up, nice and neat. And I'm going to go for 3. So line the tips up, and these are all going on the same way. So it's sort of concave on concave. So they lay nice and flat like that. So there's 3 CDC feathers, quite long. So now I'm just going to moisten my finger and just tease them back, just to consolidate it into one nice sort of wing. And I'm going to tie this in at the back of the thorax here. So I'm just going to offer it up for length. We want it so it's going to overhang the tail by a little bit. So offer it up for length. Hold it on top of the shank and pinch and loop it on there. Couple of turns. Check you're happy for length. Check it's on top of the shank where you want it. I always think any fly is a chain of processes, isn't it? You know, it's all about checking each process as you go along. Because, you know, if you don't, you'll go on to the next process and think, oh no, I wish I'd just done that a bit better. You know, so it's always worth taking the time and just checking you're happy. You just trim the butts off, get that tied in nice and neatly. Tidy away any bits. And run the thread back up to where the thorax starts. So now we're gonna do a dubbing loop. We're gonna do a hare's ear dubbing loop in there. So I'm spinning my bobbin holder anti-clockwise to flatten the thread out. It's not the right. It's not. Can't really see. But we are going to use, chatting about the Kindle dubbing earlier. It's not in the bag. But here is this nice selection. It's just my own personal sort of natural dubbins. I've got fox squirrel there, my own hare's ear mix. There's a mole and blue rabbit one, which is really nice. These 3 are Kindle. That's the hare and squirrel mix. That's their squirrel, and they've started to do a grey squirrel one now, which is really nice as well. So what I use some of the Kindle hare and squirrel mix. So I'm going to get my dubbing sorted out before I do any of like the dubbing loop stuff. So I haven't got to try and, you know, get my dubbing sorted while I've got my finger in a loop and trying to sort, you know. So what basically I've got my dubbing. I just want to tease it out. Just trying to align the fibres a bit. You can always check for clumps and lumps while you're at it, but this is really, really nice dubbing. So there's our, not going to go mad. It's just a nice little bit of dubbing there. So hopefully my thread is now flat. So for years with dubbing loops, I always used to use like a conventional dubbing needle to split the thread, but I've had a real revelation with, this is quite a expensive posh dubbing needle. This is a copter one. But the beauty of this is you can see the ball on the end, can't you? So this is a needle specifically used. I think it's for applying like UV resins and things to flies. But this is absolutely bloody amazing at splitting thread. You'd think you know, the sharper dubbing needle would be superior. But this is amazing. You just rub it up and down the thread, and it just finds its way through the middle. It's really cool. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to lay the thread on my finger, and then get my round-ended dubbing needle and rub it up and down on the thread. And it's gone, we've got straight through, but it's not quite central, so I'll do it again. That's it. There we go. Always a bit worrying. You think, do a dubbing loop, it always goes straight through, but you think when you're doing it on camera, it's probably not going to, but I'm happy with that. It's gone through. So now we're going to get our hare and squirrel dubbing. So I'm just going to offer that up into the loop. Finger out. So there we go. So now I'm going to support the thread, and I'm going to start spinning in a clockwise direction. And then there we go, it's starting to spin up. So let's get rid of that. So there we go. So there's our dubbing loop. And the beauty of the dubbing loop obviously is, you know, the reason you use it instead of just using an ordinary dubbing technique is it's such a softer, fluffier, it's almost like a hackle. You could just dub it traditionally and rake it out with a Velcro brush or whatever, but this is just so much more movement. The fly just comes alive underwater. So I'm going to just tease the fibres back as I go. It's worked out just enough. Leave myself a nice little gap at the head. There we go. So we've got a nice fluffy thorax. These fibres back. Keep it nice and neat. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a sort of a loop wing type emerger. So I'm going to fold the wing over. Some CDC protruding at the eye. There we go. Pinch and loop technique again. Pinch it down. There's a bit of a crammer, so you need a bit more room. Use your thumbnail just to create a little bit more room. Neat little head. Finish. So this is a nice sort of Danica Emerger pattern. There's lots of movement in it. The CDC, obviously, when these hatch, they split on the back of the thorax and, you know, erupt from out of the middle of the thorax. So this is a great way of imitating coming out of the thorax. If you want to, there's always like some bits of CDC that come back when, you know, the short fibers in the wing. But I think that they just add to it. You know, they're just more movement, more flotation. They look like little legs. So there's our first pattern, and that was at the Devon show, the Roadford show a couple of years ago. Brian Ratcliffe, he put me onto these things. So it's a car touch-up paint pen, basically. And Bob Lomax uses them as well. So if Brian and Bob use them, they can't be too bad. So they're really good if you want to apply tiny bits of varnish in little awkward spots. So they've got a really tight lid on them, but that's a good thing because you don't want it going everywhere. So they basically, it's like a sort of fine needle, and you can just I always squirt a tiny bit out on my finger first, just to check that it's not sort of clogged and going everywhere.
They're very good, Lee.
Sorry?
Very good. I've been using one for quite a while.
Yeah, no, I think they are popular. The only thing I got warned about was if you buy them and they've got a metal ball in, that when you shake it, it's like the clacker. The metal balls can make the varnish discolor. So there's a little plastic ball in there. I don't think it does much, but then I don't think it needs to really.
No.
But no, they're great for tiny little flies just getting a little tiny spot of varnish in places that are awkward. So I don't use it very often, but when I do use it, it is really handy.
If the nozzle gets blocked,
Yeah.
it goes hard. If you just touch it with a cigarette lighter, it frees it.
Oh well. I've got
Sometimes you get a little flame from it.
yeah, because I got a load of like acupuncture needles. They're really good. Really fine needle for if it clogs. I normally just pop an acupuncture needle down it. But I'll try that. I'll try that next time.
Well, I got that off Bob Lomax actually.
Yeah, no, That would say if he uses them, they've got to be good, aren't they?
Because I think he told me that Mark Roberts, the Welsh guy.
Yeah, I know Mark.
Yeah, he started them off, I think.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah.
Yeah, but they are very, very good.
Yeah, yeah. So just really good for difficult areas. If you can't quite get in there, and so there's our first emerger.
You couldn't put the link for that little thing on the WhatsApp group for us, could you?
For
I
you
put
buy them for the varnish dispenser. Yeah, you can get them on Amazon and that. They're basically, you buy them filled with paint, but obviously you buy them empty for. I'll have a look. I can share it. I'll do that. No problem.
Thank you.
That's all right. So our next fly, we're going to have a go at the Uff's Killer, which is I've got a picture of it. Our Salisbury and District Angling Club, they sort of created a book, and on the cover they put the Uff's Killer. So it's a pretty awesome looking fly. It's quite there's not many components to it, but it's pretty cool. So we'll have a go at doing one of those. So he uses a clink hook, but I'm going to use a small lightweight grub hook. But basically, to give credit where credit is due, they were invented by a guy called Ulf Hagström from Sweden, and it's all about. You can see, I've got some here. It's all about the sort of the footprint on the water. And when you cast these out, you're waiting for them to land. They take so long. They fall so softly on the water, and I think that is the key to them. They fall so softly. They've just got a parachute hackle, and the parachute hackle is at the bottom, so it's got an amazing footprint. Where the hook is sort of completely at the bottom, they land the right way up every time. And I remember on one of our local beats at Bapton, there's the car park area, and right on the Wiley by the car park area, there was a big brownie there, and he'd seen everything, because people would get out of the car, set up, have a chuck at this brownie, and he would not take anything. And I cast one of those to it, literally first, as soon as it hit the water, he just grabbed it. I'm convinced it's because they land so softly. Here's a slightly smaller one in a golden olive colour. So it's a really cool way to get the three tails as well, which we're doing a bit. So there's golden olive one, and you can even go smaller. Ulf, he says you can go down to size 20s, but here's a smaller one, this sort of large dark olive size. It's large, so it's only 2 tails on that because it's a LDO. But they're fun to tie. The only difference apart from the hook that I've done with tying these is Ulf will varnish the reversed mallard feather used for the abdomen on these. Ulf he varnishes the whole thing to make it more sort of robust, because obviously these do get ripped to pieces a bit. They're not the most sturdy fly. But if you've got a few in your box for like big fish that have seen everything, they're definitely worth having a few in your box. And they're fun to tie. They're quite impressive. They do look really cool, you know, once you get them. They take a little bit of practice. I used to struggle tying them to start with, but once you get the hang of them. So we are going with. I'm not going to use a clink hook. I'm going to use. There's another grip hook. It's a lightweight. I tie a lot of dry flies on these, I must admit. It's a lightweight grub hook, a 14711 BL in a size 12. It's an Emerger pupa hook. But they're light, they're strong. It's a good hook to have. So we're gonna tie the sort of golden olive version. So I've got to change my thread. So what have we got now? We've got a golden olive thread. This is just a Uni 80 in golden olive. So we get some thread on there. So we start off at the eye, run the thread down until you're sort of nearly above the point of the hook. This is the best thing I got at BFFI this year. Is a Venomed scissors. The guys were about 2 stalls down from me on the clinic, and yeah, I love them. They're great. That's my best buy recently. So we've got the thread above the point of the hook. So I'm just going to wind back up to the eye again, and then because what we're going to do, we're going to tie a flank feather in and then pull it back. I don't want the thread sort of slipping out the way. I'll make sure the thread is sort of nailed there. So what I'm going to do is just run on a little whip finish to the center of our thread wraps there. So that's just making it. We've got a good sturdy foundation and nothing slipping because we've got a whip finish right there in that point. Now I'll get me bag of stuff for this fly.
What was it called again, Lee?
Uff's Killer. UFFES. Uff's Killer. And it's Ulf Hagstrom from Sweden was the guy who came up with it. Yeah, so it's a pretty amazing fly. They look cool and they work. So now I've got some mallard feathers here, courtesy of Mr. Cooper. So it's just finding one about the sort of right size, really. You don't go for the massive feathers. Let's have a look at that one. So here's a golden olive feather. So basically what I want to do is remove all the fluff, just so we can see what we got. So we'll clean the stem off there. So it's all about reversing the feather. So when we reverse the feather, what we mean is we tease some of the fibers forwards. You should moisten your fingers for doing this. So I reckon I need to remove. What you don't want, you want to try and avoid is the stem here is really quite fat there as well, which is going to make it harder to tie in. So I'm going to remove some more fibers. And then make sure when you get to up here, make sure that it's the same either side. So there's everything, all the fibers are back. Yeah, see, there's one fiber too many on that side. Make sure it's equal both sides. When you come to do the tails, there we go. Sorry about that. So this part here is going to be our tail. this part here is going to be our abdomen. So this is probably the trickiest bit of the tie. Is there's our abdomen. Is tying it in. So what I do is I tie it in up here and then slide it back into position, and that helps because then it helps pull all the fibres down tight as well. So I'm going to offer that up there. A couple of loose turns, 2 loose turns on it, and then hold that there and tease it back to the desired length. A little bit bigger than that. Okay. Brilliant. So there's our abdomen. The tails back here. We need to sort out the tails in a bit. But first of all, I'm not one for adding sort of glue and bits to flies. I don't like doing that. But because we're just tying everything on that one spot, I'll just add a little bit of varnish just to help give it a bit more strength. And then just get some more thread wraps on there, but don't stray, sort of try and keep the thread wraps in that one spot. So now we need our wing. So I've got some nice sort of a dun coloured poly yarn. He's been knocking around for it. An old August one's been knocking around for a long time. There's a bit of dun coloured poly yarn. So we're going to tie this in. We want this basically like a sort of like a parachute post. So I'm going to offer it up. I'm going to tie it in the middle on top of where we tied in the feather already. A couple of turns. And then we just want to sort of post it a little bit just to consolidate it into one wing. So I'm not going to go mad. I literally just need a few turns, just enough to consolidate it up into one wing. There we go. Now we're going to get our hackle. So just to match up colour wise, you can tie these in any size, any colour you like. So basically just use, you know, the colours which work well together. So I've got a golden olive top coat. We've got our hackle. You can afford to have quite a big hackle on this. It's, you know, it's and it's amazing. Like I say, you cast it out, you're literally waiting for it to land. They land so slowly. So there's our stripped off some of the rubbish at the bottom of the hackle. And what you could do, a bit like how Hans tied the clink hammer, if you want it to sit lower in the water, you can wind the hackle with the concave side up. It will sit lower in the water, sit higher in the water if you have the parachute with the concave side down. So I'm going to tie this in on your side. So I've just holding it alongside the hook, get it tied in on those spots. And just for belt and braces now, I can lift up this front bit and I can tie the stalk in at the eye as well, just for a bit of added security. While we're at it, this stalk here of the mallard feather, we can just lash that down in there as well. That's going to help reinforce things a bit. And then we can trim off. Excuse me, I'm just going to do it there so I can see. There we go. So now everything should be in place. There's quite a big stalk on that. But... So now it's the case of winding our parachute. So because I wind my thread that way, it's a bit difficult to show on the camera. I always wind my parachutes that way. so they go in harmony with each other. You trap a lot less fibres like that. If you wind the other way against they clash, and you'll trap more fibres. So always think when you're going to wind parachutes, which way around you're going to wind it, so that they go in harmony with your thread wraps. So now I'm going to wind underneath the tail, over the eye, underneath the front bit, and then, like normal, most parachutes, try and get each turn below the previous one. I'll do one more turn after this. So try and creep it below the previous one. Should I use my hackle pliers now? And then I'm going to pull it down against the hook, and that should hopefully open up a gap in the feather down there for it to be tied in. So I can jiggle my thread underneath the parachute, over the eye of the hook. Do it again, get this tied in. There we go. So I'll trim off the hackle. And then whip finish. Neat little head. And get any of the little fibres out of the way. Unfortunately, I didn't cut off the stalk. There's a bit of lump of stalk in there. I didn't cut it off tight enough. Just hold the parachute up just to get a whip finish in there. And then, so now we've got the part of the feathers up here. Sometimes if they're about the right length for the wing, I just leave them there. But I've always cut some off like that. We can always cut our wing to length. So I like to do it on an angled cut instead of just cutting it flat like that. I like to angle it down so the front of the wing is longer than the back. There we go. So now for the tails, because we've just got the big fan still of the feather. So what I will need to do is I'll get my sharp dubbing needle, and I want to isolate 3 fibres either side. So I think that's 2, 3. That's 3. Yeah, that's 3. 1, 2, 3. Just try and moisten them to keep them out of the way. Whatever you do not want to cut these. Not too many. Just moisten them either side, and then what we want to do is trim out this big bit, get the main bit out of the way. So we're just left with 3 fibres either side. Got to be careful you don't cut down too low. There we go. And now it's just a case of the bottom 2 fibres on each side will create the 2 side tail fibres. The top 2 fibres will create the middle one. So it's just a case of isolating them. Sometimes they don't want to play. There we go. So I just got my varnish. Just drop my dubbing needle. So the 2 fibres that are your side, I'll just run a little bit of varnish up them. That's them sorted. The two side tails are easy. They can just run a little bit of varnish up and they stay together straight away. The middle 2, because they're both from different sides, sometimes they take a little bit of persuading, but if you just run a little bit of varnish up both of them, and then just sometimes if you just leave it a minute or two, just let the varnish tack off a little bit, and then they will stick together. Just leave that for a sec. But I say that I think doing them in size 20s would be a bit fiddly. This is sort of down to a 16 for like a LDO. But they're good fun. It's fun to tie. All right, let's try that one again. There we go, sticking together now. Okay. So they've got a good sort of hooking ability, because obviously the hook is just hanging down from the bottom. So they've got a great sort of hook up ability. You've got the three tails, which is really cool. Got the wing, it sort of it you know, flicks all the switches on all the triggers, Mayfly triggers. It's got a brilliant footprint because it just sits on the parachutes underneath. A really cool fly. So they're a bit delicate, but you know, if you've got a few, they're good for big fish that have seen everything. Maybe as I go along, hopefully. I dropped my dubbing needle. But now we're going to do one of my favourites, and it's basically, I call it a Phezz'y May, and it's just it's a great pattern because it's got lots of movement, lots of sort of it's got a busy fly on the water. It's caught loads of fish for me, so I might have demonstrated it before, but it's sort of evolved since then. It's slightly different now. So I'm going to use the same hook I did for the first fly. This is a size 12, the grip 11801BL. I'm going to go back to my UTC thread because I like that. I tried getting some tan. I can't find any online anywhere, so I'm sure I'll find some somewhere. So we just run some thread on the hook down to the bend. A nice foundation of thread on there. Come off the waist. And we're going to have a tail material. So I've just got some hen pheasant there for a tail material. So I'll just isolate about 5 fibres. Trout can't count, so at least if a few break, it doesn't matter. So there's our tail. So I've lined up the tips, peel them off. Offer it up for length. So I want our tails to be about the same length as the hook. Swap hands, tie the tail in, check you're happy, and then I can run it up. That's tied in. And do the little kick trick to keep it on top of the shank. Do a nice flat cut so we don't have a nasty step in there. And then run the thread back down towards the bend. So we can have a palmed hackle on this. This fly it's very similar. My good friend Steve Skuce, he ties his the May franglais and the May anglais. It's sort of a take on the French partridge, just as a sort of a similar one, but tied with hen pheasant. And so I have gone a bit different on it since then. But so now we're going to use some barred ginger saddle hackle. just to create a nice palmed abdomen, which will do several things. It's going to be the buoyancy basically for the fly. It'll make it float. It also creates loads of little dimple points on the water surface, which is what the fish are looking for when they're looking up for the the imprint of the insect's feet on the water. So I've just pulled off some fibres on the end of our hackle there, just to make a nice neat tying in point. So I'm just going to tie that in back here by the tail. So I want to make sure whenever I tie a hackle in, I try and make sure that there's at least sort of about 1 millimetre of bare stem still sticking out. So when you start winding, you're not straight on the fibres. You've got sort of your half a turn of just on bare stem before you get going. Just helps the hackle align, and it stops any sort of unsightly bits sticking out. Not that it would matter on this fly anyway, but it makes it neater and easier to tie in. So now we're going to dub our abdomen. So we just use the same dubbing we used for our nymph emerger. So get the thread back at the tail. Some of this hen's #1 hair dubbing. And with this, there's a bit of a clump in there. So before I dub anything, I always tease the dubbing out. Just makes it light and fluffy. I remember Charles and Alex Jardine was showing that basically if you've got dubbing that's in a lump like that, you can't do anything with it. You want to be able to see air through it. You need to tease it out, make it nice and light and wispy, and it will just go on the thread so really easily. So there we go. So we're off with this up to the thread. Spin it on. So I've got me anchor point. And I can tease it out. Yeah, that's better. And again, just make a nice mayfly shaped abdomen. Not too fat. And again, I'm going to stop and leave quite a big sort of thoracic region. That's worked out about perfect there. So I'm going to wind our palmed hackle. So I'm going to crease it. That was a Charles Jardine technique. Before you wind a hackle, crease it forwards. As if you're sort of origami paper folding, you crease the fold before you do anything. Same with the stem of the hackle. So put it forward, put a crease in it before you start winding it. So we're just going to wind up a nice palmed body just up through the abdomen. This is the flotation of the fly. So I'll hold the hackle up. I always hold materials up when we come to tying in. So I jiggle the thread through. 2 turns on it, a couple of turns in front of it. That's not going anywhere. And the reason for always holding materials up, when you come to cut things off, there's no way you can cut the thread if your material's poking out. So it saves the horrible sound of the bobbin holder hitting the deck. So I get the thread back to the far back of the thoracic region again. So now with this, the original Phezz'y May, what I used to do was I would have dubbed the thorax already and palmed right the way up to the front, and then just wind a soft hackle at the front. Now what I've started doing is palmering the soft hackle as well, and I think it just gives the fly a bit more depth, more movement. When you look at an insect, it hasn't got all the fibers, all the tails and everything coming out of its head, has it? It's all it's in the thorax. It's where all the bits come out of. So we're going to use some lovely chevron hen pheasant, natural hen pheasant, for our palmed hackle in the thorax. So Blue Peter style is one I prepared earlier.
You say you called it a Phezz'y May?
Yeah, just because it's hen pheasant, so it's just Phezz'y as in pheasant.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing that exciting. So we got our feather here, so I've just got to remove all the fluffy rubbish at the stem. But this has been, I think, the first year I started tying these and fishing these was the COVID, so as 2020, wasn't it? So yeah, these have it's caught me loads of fish. This fly, it's really cool. So there's our got the rubbish off the stem. So now I'm going to reverse the feather, prepare it for tying in. We're going to tie it in by the tip. So just tease the fibres forwards. Right, there we go. So now I'm going to tie that in by the tip. What I can do, just to basically just cut the most of it off, and then we've got a nice little tag just to tie it in. So I've got to tie it in with our good sort of convex side facing forwards. There we go. Put that in there. Use all the fibres back. And now I'm going to get a darker. I always think whenever tying an insect, the dubbing you use for the thorax should always be darker and coarser than whatever you've used for the abdomen. So I'm going to use some of my own blend pairs here, which is a nice darker one. So I'm just going to conventionally dub this, just dub a nice darker thorax. Right. There we go. And now I'm going to palmer our soft hackle up through the thorax. So I'll definitely use my hackle pliers for this. So you've got to be very careful. These the stems on the tips of these feathers are quite delicate, so you've got to be very careful when you start winding this. So once you get going, it's fine. So I'm just going to tease the fibres back a little bit. And then palmer up through. So I think this just makes it a busier fly. It's just more going on. It's a lot more movement. And I know when this catches in the drag and goes under, it works really well as a wet fly as well. So there we go. So there's our palmered thorax. So again, I'm going to hold the material up, the stalk, and then I can jiggle the thread. There's one fibre would stick out, wouldn't it? There's that tied in. Pull that stray fibre back. There we go. And I think, I'm not so sure, but because this has only got the palmer on the abdomen, I think that when it sits on the water, it sits a little bit more nose heavy, as you know, is like the natural wood. Sort of sticks its bum up in the air more. Now we just whip finish. And if you want, I can post. If you want me to post any of the dressings for these on the chat, I can. There's no problem.
Yeah, put them on the WhatsApp for us.
Yeah. I'll have to do it tomorrow night, I expect, but I can do
Yeah,
that.
no rush.
And then just a little spot of varnish. You can use your dispenser or your needle. And there we go. So Phezz'y May. So hopefully it's in focus with you guys. But it's just a great dry fly. It's nothing sort of fancy. It just works really well. What have I done? I was going to show you something else, but I think the lid's stuck on it. No, I'll forget that. So there you go. So there's our second done pattern, and this is my go-to. This is one I fish this all the time, and I expect these tied smaller would be really good for, with a slightly different coloration, really good for large dark olive and March brown as well. So it's just a nice, there's lots going on. You've got the palmer, the soft hackle. It's just a busy flight on the water. So now we're going to go on to our spinner pattern. And I think I've demonstrated before my sort of, I do sliding mono loop type patterns. I've done it from like nymph emergers, but the most successful pattern I've had with it is like a blue-winged olive spinner. So basically it's a parachute with no post. And a lot of people would say, well, why not have a post? Because it just makes it difficult to see. But I'm convinced fish can see posts. They can see the post. They're not, unless you're looking at the fly directly underneath. If there's any other view of it, no matter, even if it's at a slight angle, you're going to see the post. So I'm convinced the fish can see the post, and they're not. If it's a done pattern, it's all well and good. The fish are expecting it to have a wing, but when it's a spinner, they're expecting it just to be led flat in the water, dying, spent. They're not expecting a post. And this thing has worked bloody amazing. The only thing is, it is a pig to see, but you just, if you see a rise, just strike. If it's anywhere near where you think your fly is, just strike. They work really well. Mono loops, sliding mono loops can be a bit of a pig, but I sort of discovered a really easy way to do them, which I'll show you now. And what we're going to do, because it's on a Danica, it's going to be a lot bigger and easier to see than tying this. So that's a 16, and they say they're wicked little fly, that is. So I'll stick with our faithful size 12 grip dry. I'm going to stick with our UTC thread in a funny off-dyed colour. Put some thread down the hook. So the spinner patterns are always a bit hit and miss with Danicas. There's a lot of spinner patterns, and a lot of them don't work great. They're not, it's a difficult thing to imitate, I think. But this one serves quite well. It seems to work pretty well. So I can time it. Our tail, obviously the spinners are a lot more monochrome than the drums. So our tail, I'm going to go for a nice dark bit of moose mane. So I will go for about 4 fibres. So when you're picking fibres out, obviously just make sure that they've got really nice tips on them. You don't want to tie it all in and realise that you've got some dodgy broken tips. But there's 4 of them, that'll do. I could stack these, but I'm just good because there's only 4 of them. I can just line them up. Tips up. So check you're happy. Miles up. Just a bit of time. Make sure you get the tips nicely lined up. There we go. That's somewhere handy. So obviously on spinners, there's a rule the tails are longer. But I'm still just going to go just a bit longer than the shank, just a bit longer than the hook. So this is great. The tail is always a good, like part of the fly. You want stiff tails on like a dry fly of this nature because it is part of the flotation device. It supports the heaviest part of the hook is the bend. So with that sitting on the water, you want some, something rigid that's going to support the weight of the hook on the water. But on saying that though, you don't want to go as far. I've seen a lot of people paintbrush filaments are really sort of quite trendy, and a lot of the plastic bivets are great, but they're almost too stiff. You can see a fish come up, and if his nose touches the tails, it almost pushes the fly out of the way. But they're too stiff. They're sort of, you don't want them, you want it just right. So you helps support the weight of the bend, but not too stiff. So I'm just going to run the thread up and get that tied in, full length of the body, flat cut. So are there people, you know, many people have tried mono loops before, but normally when I started doing them, I would have tied in a bit of mono before I even tied the tail in, and then it's a nightmare because you're continually trying to tie the whole fly with these bits of mono hanging out of the hook. So the way I do it now, say we're avoiding all of that, I can basically tie the whole rear of the fly before even thinking about getting to the mono loop bit. So there's the tail done. So oops, run the thread back down to the bend. There we go. We're going to stick with our number 1 hen's hair dubbing. There's definitely some clumps in there, so I'm going to tease those out. Make it a nice fluffy dubbing. Goes on the thread a lot easier. So I know a lot of people will always use dubbing wax. They think dubbing wax will solve all of their dubbing problems, but as soon as you put dubbing wax on the thread, you can't move your dubbing up and down. You know, it's the great thing about having not using dubbing wax is you can manipulate your dubbing up and down the thread. This dubbing's it's a very friendly, user-friendly dubbing, this anyway. So now we're gonna run up again our nice Danica abdomen. I'm really boring, don't use ribs or anything, just now we're going to do our dubbing loop. So I've got basically some 3-pound nylon. Hopefully I can find the end quite quickly. There we go. So I'm going to unspool about 8 inches, something like that. And then I'm going to fold it in half. So we've got two ends. You probably can't see it. I've got 2 ends there in my right hand and a loop there in my left hand. So I've got to tie this in on top of the shank, so the 2 ends of the nylon are protruding over the eye. So that it ends back there. I don't know if you can see it, where my finger is there. So I've got about a couple of inches overhanging the eye. So I just got to tie this in on top of the shank. And I can put loads of turns on, and it's not gonna. Mono is such a slippy material. I'm not doing tight turns, but I can afford to really tie it in, and it will still slide backwards and forwards nice and easily, no problem whatsoever. So basically, we're going to use this loop as our parachute post, and then we're going to pull that forward to compress our parachute on top of the hook. So we're going to have a postless parachute. As I said, it's great for patterns like this that the fish are not expecting to see an upright wing on a spinner. So we're going to use we've got a nice grizzle cock cape, nice chevron one the Tina's. Her birds are really coming on, her birds now. She's never going to be, up with sort of Mets and that, but they are getting really nice. So I'm just going to strip off a load of hackles from fibres, from the stem. One of the really nice things about Tina's hackles is the stems are really thin, which is great, especially for doing things like this. So I'm going to tie this in. It doesn't matter which way up you do it because they twist most of the time anyway. Whenever you do try and wind the parachute around mono, there's no sort of structure there, so the hackle ends up twisting anyway. So it doesn't matter which way we tie it. But just tie it in next to that loop, and I can continue tying it in up to the eye because we don't want it falling out. And trim off the waist. Make sure that's tied in. Make sure all of this is staying on top of the hook shank. So even after all that winding, see the mono still slides nice and easily. That's why we know when you go to tie in mono and you don't want it to slide, it's always worth chewing the ends because then at least it's got some purchase. You just keep tying it and it will just slide and slide and slide. It's such a slipping material. So now I'm going to go for a really nice, because we're going quite monochrome again. I want a really nice dark body thorax on this. So I'm going to go with some of the Kindale Squirrel. This is a lovely dub in this. So I'm just going to tease out a bit of that. Nice and dark. Just fluff it up. Take a bit of time just to make it nice and user friendly. And then because we want this parachute to sit flat on top of the hook shank, basically what I've got to make sure I do is put equal amounts of dub in either side of this post, and that will help it sit flat. If you have more dub in one side, it will sort of sit at an angle. So we'll make sure we've got it some equal dub in either side. Do a few turns behind the post.
I think Christina's.
Sorry?
I think Christina's hackles are now better than Met's, in my
I
opinion.
don't know. I think you've got it's a bold statement trying to compete with the American farms, isn't it? But she is doing really well. Her products are nice.
I mean, the Whiting's got a more feather count, but hers, because they're nice, small and round on the feather, they lie nicely round the hook.
Yeah. Her hen hackles are amazing. I love her hens are amazing.
Or
So
her
there we go.
hens are better than Whiting's.
Yeah, she does. Her hens are amazing. So she's very clever. She's got a lovely range, and her dyeing is out of this world. If you want anything dyed, she is the
The
queen of
best
dyeing.
there is. Best there is on dyeing by far.
Absolutely.
Her pheasant rump patches are unbelievable.
Yeah. No, she does. I think she does really well with those. So now we've got our thorax dubbed. We've got our loop. We've got our hackle. So basically, it's probably easier doing this with a gallows tool. But basically, what you can't see above is I've got my thumb in the loop up there above where you can't see. And so, but always use both hands. So even though my thumb's above, I can still use my fingers on that hand. So I'm going to wrap this parachute around. So I'm using both hands. I'll go about 3 or 4 turns. And then, holding the feather quite tight, I've got to put my finger in the loop and just push it down. So we're just tamping the parachute down on top of the thorax. And normally with a parachute, you'd be winding below. Each turn goes below the previous one. This way, we're not. We're winding up. We're going up the mono. So then pat it down, cinch it down. When you're happy that you've got enough turns, I'll do a couple more. When you're happy you've got enough turns of parachute, then I've got to put my finger, I'm holding my finger on top of the parachute, and with this remaining piece of hackle stalk, instead of going around the mono, I'm going to go through the loop. So I've gone through the loop, put it down, and I'll do that twice just for belt and braces. So I've gone round probably about 10 times, and I've gone through the loop twice. And I just want to make sure, the thumb's got stuck. Basically, push everything down so the parachute is pushed down on top, and then I've taken my thumb and everything out of the loop, and I can pull the mono loop down. It's really nice and tight. You can really put it tight, and then you've got a really cool like postless parachute on top of the hook shank. So I'm going to trim out that hackle. make sure, so try not to trap any fibres. So I'm just going to sneak the thread under the parachute and over the hook eye, just to tie in this mono. You can give it another tug just to make sure it's nice and tight. Come out the mono. Nice neat little head. Because this is a spinner, I'm using light thread. So just to make it match up with our nice dark dubbing, I can just get a dark marker pen. I can change my thread to black. Quick finish. These are surprisingly robust. They do last well. There we go. So we just got to preen the parachute into position a bit. But this is a great thing for the dispenser, because you've got an awkward little head to get to because you've got a big parachute on top of it. So I'll just put a tiny little spot on the head, and then what you don't want to do is get a load of varnish on top of that. It's just that central bit where it's all cinched down. It's just nice to put a tiny little spot of varnish on there. You don't want a lot. You don't want varnish getting into all this lovely soft dubbing. You just want a tiny little spot, and it's just belt and braces. It doesn't ever go anywhere, but I just like to do that just for, you know, reassurance really, belt and braces. And there you go. So we've got poster's parachutes. This nice big parachute. So when I'm, what I should have said, sorry, which I didn't say, when I come to select a feather, you need the fibres of the feather to basically be the length of the shank. Then that would sort of be the correct length for the wing. So when you've got your parachute, basically the parachute helps imitate the very sort of monochrome, sort of gauzy, you know, spinner wing. But it's just a sort of no faff, simple sort of spinner pattern, basically. It seems to work very well. So, and I say, if you can tie them down to small, they work really well. Blue-winged olive spinners. The only problem with these flies is they're a pig to see. But if where I fish around here, the chalk stream tactics, it's all close range. So basically, you know, most of the time you're not casting very far anyway. And if in doubt, strike. You know, if you see anything suspicious and you think it might be a fish, you just strike anyway. So there you go. So that is the flies I've got prepared. But I can take some. I'll send some photos as well, because it's a bit. They're not massively amazingly in focus here. But I'll send some nice pictures of the flies as well, so you can get a better look.
That's very informative.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, very, 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 very good.
Yeah. And yeah, brilliant. I hope you've all enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Lee.
That's all right. Pleasure.
Thank you, Lee.